Podcasts contain our existence. They are like gods. And the fact that we create them from living, experiencing, listening, thinking, feeling, giving, they remind me of what's great about being alive.
Yeah, you're welcome for asking you to do this podcast, Obssa. It sounds like you're eternally grateful to me.
Forever grateful. Oh, I'm so grateful. This is what it means to be alive.
Indeed, folks, if you haven't started a podcast, you aren't living. Welcome to Science Fiction Book Club, a podcast for bookworms and stargazers. In every episode, we dive into the pages of our favorite science fiction novels to break down the big ideas, ask the nerdy questions, and maybe learn a little bit about ourselves along the way. My name's Abu, and as always, I'm joined by Obssa to finish reading another science fiction novel.
That's right. I'm excited to talk about this one today.
Yes, I can't wait to get into it today. Before we get into it, Obssa, let's knock out some quick housekeeping, starting, of course, with our spoiler warning. Folks, today is our final episode covering Death of the Author, which means, as the title states, we are focusing on chapters 36 to 51, which is the final third of the book. So before you continue listening, make sure you've done the reading and make sure you've read the book cover to cover.
Of course, we encourage you, as Abu just said, to read along with us and share your thoughts. So you can email us at sci-fi book club pod at loreparty.com. You can also join our Patreon at patreon.com/sci-fi book club pod. We post free reading guides, discussion questions, bonus clips, bloopers, all that good stuff on that Patreon. It's also where you can join our Discord, where we like to keep these nerdy sci-fi discussions going with fellow readers in our community, just like you.
And all of those links are in the show notes below, so check them out after you're done listening. Okay, housekeeping out of the way. Here's the game plan for today's book club episode, the same as every book club episode. We'll start by summarizing the assigned chapters for today's reading. Then we'll share our feelings and impressions of the entire book at this point, now that we've completed it. And finally, later in the episode, we'll dive into our sci-fi analysis, and Obssa, you will walk us through a deep dive thematic takeaway. So all of that is coming up in just a minute, folks. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we are completing Death of the Author. We'll see you in a minute.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
This episode is brought to you by Perfect Bistro Cat Food. Cats, this ad is for you. Has your human ever called you picky, persnickety, choosy? If so, Perfect Bistro Cat Food is for you. With ingredients like wild-caught tuna and pasture-raised lamb, tantalizing textures, and delectable flavors that meet even the most discerning cat standards. You're not picky, you're just perfectionists. Perfect Bistro, mealtime perfection for every cat. Have your human visit perfectbistro.com.
Welcome back, listeners. As always, let's begin with our summary. And as we've been doing with this book, we'll break down the chapters one layer at a time, starting with the present-day storyline of Zelu. 2 years after her father's death, Zelu flies to Nigeria with Hugo, Marcy, and Uchenna over Msizi's objection. He is understandably worried for her health and safety.
That's right.
Before heading to her father's village outside Lagos, the crew takes a boat trip out to Tarwa Bay Beach, where Zelu swims alone with some dolphins, echoing the story of her father that we had heard earlier in the book. Zelu links up with her Aunt Mary and Uncle Ralph and travels under armed guard to her family's village, where she gets a mixed reception from her father's siblings. Many of them are still skeptical or even outright hostile about her exos, and they're not afraid to voice it.
Certainly not.
She ends up visiting her parents' abandoned home in the village and her father's grave, but doesn't quite get the kind of closure she was expecting. Quote, "For the first time in her life, Zelu felt old." End quote.
Yeah. I found the grave scene really powerful, actually, because I think she had built it up in her mind for all of these years as this huge thing. I need to go to my father's grave. It's going to be this moment. Maybe I'll get closure. Maybe it'll feel like something.
Yeah.
I secretly also wonder if she was hoping that it would unlock like book 2 ideas for her, get through her writer's block or something. I think it felt like for her, I'll go to my father's grave. It'll be another chapter. I'll finally turn the page and things will turn around. And it kind of ends up being like just disappointing and sad.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a pretty powerful way to show that. Because in reality, it's like something like this isn't going to be some magical moment that turns your life around. Life's not a movie.
Right. Not every thread ends in a bow.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. So after visiting her father's grave, the crew is returning back to the airport, but this is where things go completely awry because they are ambushed by armed men.
Oh, no.
And Zelu makes a frantic break for it. As gunshots go off, she just runs, runs, using her exos, which allow her to run for an incredible 35 miles straight.
That's insane. Wow.
And the entire time, she's on her phone streaming it live on Facebook to millions and millions of viewers.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way she can figure out how to get help or get anyone's attention.
Yeah. Real blockbuster scene.
Yeah. Real blockbuster scene. This was crazy. I was reading this and I was like, I cannot believe this is happening. What's happening?
Totally.
Luckily, no one is hurt. Hugo, Marcy, Uchenna, they manage to get away. The guards that were protecting them are able to protect them. And Zelu makes it all the way back to the airport just by running.
Yeah.
And there are people there waiting because of the live stream ready to help her.
Yeah.
So she immediately gets help. Nobody gets hurt at the end of the day, and they all make it back to the States safe and sound, although, of course, deeply traumatized by this experience. Zelu's siblings come to the airport to pick her up. And this is another really powerful scene where Chinyere goes like nuclear on Zelu in the car, basically blaming her for this trip, essentially blaming her for getting kidnapped, blaming her for live streaming it. Yeah. Quote, "Why'd you have to show the world your own mistake?" End quote. Ugh. Which is a wild accusation.
Tough to read. Yeah.
Inherent in a mistake is that you didn't want it to happen, right? Like that's the definition of a mistake. Yeah. And so to blame someone for a mistake is to say, like, the thing you didn't want to happen happened. How, like, that's your fault is a little bit ridiculous. At the same time, I also understand, like, this outburst, right? Yeah. If you spent years telling somebody not to do a thing because you know it's dangerous, it's risky, it's against your best interest to do this, and then they go ahead and do it anyway, and the exact thing you warned them was going to happen happens, part of you wants to be like, fuck you, I told you so.
Definitely. Yeah.
So I as awful as this is from Chinyere, and I don't think she should have done it, especially when Zelu is in such a delicate position and has just barely survived with her life.
Right.
I also understand why she did it.
Right.
So I found this a really powerful moment here.
And moving on, we soon have Mzizi, I think maybe reeling from everything that's happened, also just realizing the strength of their bond, kind of throughout all of these somewhat horrendous life events. And he is inspired to propose. It's also mostly for immigration reasons.
Yeah, I mean, but he's running a business. He's got to travel.
But he does seem to genuinely love Zelu. And so this is honestly more heartwarming than it is anything else, honestly.
Yeah.
And to her surprise, probably his as well, Zelu agrees.
Whoa.
And Mzizi ends up arranging a small surprise wedding at a planetarium with just a few of Zelu's siblings. As an aside, not all of them attended.
Not all of them. A select few, the good ones.
A select few of the siblings. As well as one of his cousins as witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
This feels like the first time, honestly, in all of Zelu's life where everything is actually just going well.
Yeah.
But underneath it all, she is still dealing with the PTSD of the attack in Nigeria. She's constantly having flashbacks and nightmares. And later, because of this, she ends up going to a gun range and eventually taking classes under, well, at least for a while, the fake name Nicole Simmons, which, she's a Nigerian woman with exos. For some reason, the persona crumbles.
Yeah, what gave it away?
Just one of the most famous people on planet Earth, but
Right.
In any case, she does eventually learn how to fire a literal rifle and take back a little bit of the control that I think she feels that she has kind of lost in the attack in Nigeria. It's something that she keeps completely private, doesn't tell any other, and doesn't really tell anybody else, including Mzizi, but it makes her feel powerful and helps her manage the PTSD.
Yeah. So as we near the end of the book, or at least as we near the end of Zelu's story arc, she is facing writer's block. She's facing mounting pressure to finally write this damn sequel that she's now blown well past the deadline on. And this is where she makes another impulsive decision after making the huge mistake of going online and reading fan fiction about her story. That's like, if you talk to any author or read anything authors say about that, that's like the number one do not do.
Yeah.
It like corrupts your own perception of your own story. Right. You run into legal troubles. Like if you accidentally are inspired by someone's fan fiction, they may have legal grounds to like sue you for, it's like
nightmare.
Fan fiction is just like a no-go zone if you're a writer, Of course, Zelu crosses that boundary. She, of course, reacts to it badly and makes an impulsive decision. She writes billionaire Jack Preston back and agrees to go on this civilian spaceflight that he really wants her to go on. She then has to tell Mzizi the news, and he is understandably furious. He does not take this well, and this becomes like kind of a really awful fight between the two of them.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, Mzizi loves her and knows her after all these years. And thus he knows there's no stopping her. Yeah. She's made up her mind. There's nothing I can say or do here that will change it. Zelu then, of course, has to tell her family. So she goes to tell her mother, who also, understandably, does not take this news well. You're going out to space? On an experimental civilian spaceship?
Yeah.
Especially after this live stream situation, this Nigeria trip, her taking another dangerous trip. It's understandable why it would keep pushing her mother to the edge here. Shockingly, when she then goes to tell her siblings, all of her gathered siblings, they support it. They think it's kind of cool. And it seems like over the years, over all of the trauma that the family has been through, her siblings, at the very least, have come to somewhat accept her for who she is, even if begrudgingly. And I thought that was interesting. I don't know that it necessarily worked for me. I don't know why any of the siblings suddenly did this like 180 about face.
Yeah.
But they did, including Chinyere, who just a few chapters ago like exploded on her in the car. This felt a bit rushed. I felt like the family dynamic was like really fast forwarded and we skipped some beats.
Yeah, we didn't really see the kind of wrestling, that they would have done internally. Like it just felt like one chapter to the other, different characters almost. Yeah.
Different characters almost. Yeah, I felt that was a weak point. Regardless, a few weeks later, another bombshell is dropped on us, the reader. Zelu takes a pregnancy test, and it turns out to be positive. She is pregnant, and she makes the absolutely wild decision to not tell a single soul, including the father of this child, Mzizi. She is going to space. Nothing is going to stop her.
Yeah.
Not even a child, not even a pregnancy. Because she knows if she brings it up, they just have so much ammunition against her, right? Like,
No, this is a hard one to excuse from Zelu. This was quite selfish.
Yeah. So to wrap up Zelu's story, she does go into space. She blasts off into space after having taken this like experimental organic augmentation thing on Jack fucking Preston's recommendation, in order to protect her and her unborn child from like space radiation or whatever. he's like, I also took the drugs. It's totally fine. Look at me. I'm cool.
Yeah.
You also take them, and then we go out into space. It's
Right.
going to be awesome. And she's like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Also, no
Let's
evidence.
not-
Just on his word.
Yeah, what? So she does that. She goes out into space. The launch sequence is kind of like this like surreal moment where
Yeah.
it's unclear what exactly is happening. She like sees a tear in reality in a bright flash, and then she's in
Dolphins.
orbit.
And,
Dolphins. She's seeing visions. You
Right.
know.
Ijele is speaking to her, I think.
That's right. Ijele is speaking to her. So it's these last couple chapters are very surreal, and
Yeah.
it's unclear if they're actually reality or if they're like pure metaphor. Regardless, Zelu's arc ends when she is in orbit, looking down on planet Earth, and suddenly, the entirety of Book 2, Rusted Robots Book 2, pops into her head. A eureka moment. She knows what the book's going to be about. It's fully formed. Hell yeah. And she decides here at the end that she's never going to write this book. This story, this sequel, it's only for her.
Right.
And that's where we end Zelu's arc in this book.
I do want to note that she contemplates never returning to the planet and just continuing
Yes.
off into space.
That's a big thread in there too. Yeah, I think we'll have to talk in a little bit about what happens.
Yeah.
Question mark, you know?
Question
Yeah.
mark, definitely. But pivoting to the Rusted Robots kind of inner story here, we finally have the official war taking place between the Humes and the Nobodies. And after a year's absence, during the midst of this, Ijele returns to Ankara, and both of them are kind of understandably playing coy about their side's war plans. You know, they've effectively got this truce between the two of them, but neither wants to reveal their factions' plans to the other.
Right.
However, a Hume called Korokoro grows increasingly suspicious of Ankara and ends up installing a monitoring app that will trigger an alarm the instant a ghost leaves anyone's system, and in this case, Ankara's system.
Uh-oh.
This essentially traps Ijele with Ankara.
Yeah. We're back where we were all those chapters ago with Ngozi, right?
That's right. Ijele does end up warning Ankara of the coming ghost assault and begs the Humes to flee. They won't. Ankara instead ends up leading 100 Humes in a strike on the Ghost's Lego server hubs, which they're able to undertake, recognizing that if there is a lightning strike or an EMP emission, the ghosts in worship just freeze.
That's right.
And of course,
How human of them.
How human of the Nobodies. Yes. The attack, of course, works, and in the split second before detonating the EMPs, Ijele actually flees Ankara's system
Oh my God,
to
this
escape
is so
the
stressful.
trigger. And Ankara can't tell if she died in the resulting blast.
Oh my gosh.
On the one hand, Ankara returns as a hero, and on the other is immediately accused of treason by Korokoro, who's got the logs, you know? He's got the logs
He's
of
got
this
the
action.
evidence, the receipts.
He's got the receipts. But there's no time for that, as just moments later, Udide arrives to tell everyone that trippers are arriving not in the months that they thought they had, but in mere days.
Holy shit.
In light of this, the Humes and Nobodies eventually agree to a truce to deal with the trippers, but this is obviously a pretty catastrophic situation.
It is. Now, it's during this truce that Ijele returns to Ankara, revealing that she had been captured and tortured by her fellow ghosts because she was accused of treason, because she had colluded with a Hume. With hope quickly dwindling here for Earth and for all of automation, Ankara comes up with the last-ditch Hail Mary plan. She goes to visit Udidi, and drawing on Ijele's perspective and her own memories of Ngozi, and with a bit of help from Udidi, she is able to write the first original story ever written by automation, ever written by a robot. Nnedi then makes contact with their lost lover, Oji, who was one of the original Trippers, who's now coming back to Earth, and shares Ankara's story with Oji in this like attempt to convince the Trippers to change their minds. Don't come back and kill us all.
Right. Don't share the love of the sun with us, for dear God's sake. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And it works. Nnedi is able to get through Oji's Tripper madness back to the Oji that they knew and loved. And this story is what bonds them. And so everyone is saved. The Trippers decide not to destroy Earth, and automation survives. Earth survives to live another day. Ijele, of course, at this point is an outcast. So Ankara takes her to that sacred grove that we had come across earlier in the book, where all of these retired robot bodies now live. Right. Robots who are just tired of existence, want to just lay down peacefully. They come to this shrine and they turn themselves off. And this is where Ijele is able to pick one of the bodies to inhabit permanently. Ijele, an AI, a ghost, is now going to permanently live inside one of these bodies from the grove.
Right. Become kind of a Hume.
Kind of a Hume, but not quite a Hume.
Yeah.
And actually, that's kind of the point that their friendship ends on. Ijele, at this moment, chooses to leave.
Yeah.
She does not want to go back to Cross River City and join the Humes. She obviously can't go back to the ghosts. She's no longer a nobody. And so she wants to venture out into the world on her own to figure out who she is.
All right.
She's not a ghost. She's not a Hume. She's something completely new. And she knows that if she sticks around with Ankara, she'll never be able to truly figure out who she is on her own. And so she leaves. And Ankara's really sad about it. It was a sad scene.
Yeah. And as we conclude the book, we come to a somewhat startling, pretty massive twist when we find out that, in fact, the inner story, the Rusted Robot section, and the tale of Ankara and Ijele was maybe, in fact, the outer loop of the story. Whoa! And that Ankara seems to have actually written the story of Zelu.
Whoa!
So, inspired by Ngozi's family history, she names the protagonist after Ngozi's astronaut great-grandmother, Zelunjo. And Ankara ends up sending this finished novel, which is called Death of the Author, to CB and the Ghost, who receive it with something other than hatred for the first time. Looks like there's some real dialogue and kind of communication happening between the nobodies and the Humes, kind of inspired by this book. And Ankara leaves Cross River City to search for Ijele, having proven to itself and to us that creation can run in both directions.
The thesis of Ankara's story.
That's right.
Wow. Okay, that's it. That is Death of the Author. Start to finish. What do you think, Obssa? Now that we've completed the book, where are your feelings at?
I'm, it's kind of same note from the previous two episodes. I continue to love this book. The final section, despite kind of the twists and the fever dream, still ended up feeling coherent and ultimately satisfying for me. Obviously, pretty wild ending there, but I will say it doesn't feel totally random. I think the thing that I kept thinking as I was reading the story is there's so much mirroring that's happening in the outer loop, the story of Zelu and her family, and the inner loop of Rusted Robots. There were just so many parallels between Ankara and Zelu that I think in hindsight kind of find this twist ending actually satisfying and not, bewildering or just kind of or random. In Rusted Robots, for example, there's, just as one example, there's the moment when Ankara is, effectively stuck at home with mom and Ngozi, which, of course, literally happened to Zelu when she was stuck at home after her professorship. Zelu is obviously socially ostracized because of her exos in the outer loop. And similarly, Ankara fears what will happen if anybody discovers Ijele inside of her. And so there's a lot of just kind of mirroring that's happening between those two stories. And similarly, Ankara, authors a story that in Rusted Robots ends up saving the world, which was, maybe a little neat or pat, but conversely, Zelu, in a sense, finishes her second novel, or at least is able to kind of crystallize what it would be, and rather than release it, decides to keep it to herself. And so there's just some kind of interesting mirroring that's happening both in kind of synchronicity, but also in contrast between the two of them, that I thought was pretty masterful. And generally, I think the way that Okorafor used storytelling to examine a lot of the questions we love talking about on this podcast was excellent. I thought the interviews, the vignettes, the flashbacks, all of that, I thought, as far as writing goes, was technically sophisticated and effective in kind of conveying the broader questions of narrative and self-determination that I think Okorafor raises in this book. So, yeah, I mean, altogether, I'm honestly super happy with this ending and kind of the way that the two threads of the story both, were in dialogue with each other, but then also just kind of individually concluded. But I don't know that I'm necessarily on the same page with you here about looking through your notes here. So I'd love to hear what worked, what didn't work for you in this kind of final third of the book.
I'm sad to say that I think the only part in which we agree is that our feelings are unchanged from last episode.
Yeah.
I at the end of the day, having read the book now cover to cover, greatly disliked it. In particular, this final third for me personally somehow managed to be completely unsatisfying on all fronts. Even with the Rusted Robot stuff that I've been genuinely enjoying this entire time, fell flat. I was like, whoa, how did we do this? And of course, the Zelu storyline, which I haven't been enjoying this entire time, continued to be unenjoyable for me in this final third. Obviously not a secret. I've been harping on this for 2 episodes now, but many of the issues that I laid out in those last 2 episodes continue to be major problems for me in this final conclusion. And some of the major plot points here in the third act didn't work for me, and were harder for me to brush off. I thought the war between the Humes and the Nobodies was extremely simplistic. I don't think we grappled at all with sort of the emotional conflict that Ankara and Ijele should have been having, being traitors within their ranks and trying to hide war plans from each other. I thought we had established earlier in the book that they can't hide anything from each other because they have access to each other's core master code or whatever. And so how are they able to hide war plans from each other? I thought was kind of convenient. And again, the Rusted Robot stuff just kind of fizzled out for me in a way that was really disappointing because I was excited to see how that ended.
Yeah.
On the Zelu side of things, Zelu was not redeemed for me in any way in this final third. I found her to be just as sort of an awful character as I have this entire book. In fact, I think in the third act, she's even more somehow even more self-destructive and selfish than she has been in the rest of the book. I mean, hiding the pregnancy from the father of her child is just a wild, selfish choice just so you can go out into space. It's selfish. It's a selfish way to treat this future child of yours too. I was just so anti that. And I just don't like the way that she treats everyone around her, basically. Everyone from anonymous fans that she doesn't know, but who respect her and like her books and are changed by them, to colleagues and her close friends and family. I think she treats all of them pretty badly, honestly. I'm also, here's another thing that I was looking forward to seeing the conclusion to, but I'm bummed that we didn't get any sort of conclusive answer to the big mystery. I'm left wondering what all of these interview chapters have been about and what they've been for this entire time. Like, what have we been hinting at? Obviously, there's a lot of theory. I went online and I read a bunch of theories that folks were putting out there. Did Zelu go out into space and die? Are those final chapters all just sort of like post-death fever dream sort of non-literal experiences? Maybe that's what that flash, that tear in reality was meant to represent. The other option is like she went into space and chose to like not come back somehow. And maybe this like radiation juice that she was injected with before she left allows her to just stay in space forever, or like go to the International Space Station and just live there forever or something. I don't know. The family interviews seem to indicate she's no longer on like Earth. She's no longer like quote unquote here.
Sure.
There's also, once we get to the twist at the end, and we learn that Ankara is actually the author who's been writing about Zelu, the character, there's also this like subtle hint that the Rusted Robots timeline might just be the far future of the Zelu timeline, because Ngozie's great-grandmother was an astronaut named Zelu.
Right.
And that is what inspired Ankara to write this character in her novel.
Right.
And is that based off a real person? Is that the Zelu we've been reading about this entire time? I don't know. I am left feeling unsatisfied. And I understand ambiguity can be a powerful tool, but in this case, I thought it was far too ambiguous. I thought it was too clever by half. I thought it got too meta. It was like, let's get meta on meta on meta on meta. And where I was like, okay, we could have used a little less meta and a bit more clarity there. That's just how I felt about it. I am interested to hear your theories. Do you have any theories on the big what happened to Zelu question?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose just one on the meta kind of nature of it. I think that is something that I will always, you're never going to get me.
You're a big fan?
To not, applaud that. I love anything that's kind of recursive that way. I mentioned this in my deep dive, but there's another book I read earlier this year you just take like anything by Christopher Nolan, it's like you get to the end and you're like, I'm actually at the beginning, like there's something kind of inherently.
But like this is kind of the Tenet problem. I mean, you and I love Tenet, I think.
Yeah, yes.
But this is like Christopher Nolan's Tenet gets clowned for this all the time.
Totally,
like, you're just like convoluted for the sake of being convoluted. None of this is making sense anymore.
Shutter Island. I mean, there's so many, kind of works kind of along these lines.
Sure. But you're a fan of that.
I am a fan of that. No, I don't mind it at all. And so like as far as like I think the thesis of the story is that Zelu is a fictional character that we are in the far future, having been told, an artificially generated narrative about this fictional human being. I think that also kind of does a few things that are interesting in how like we relate to the character of Zelu, because once again, Zelu is not actually, in this framing of it isn't really the narrator or the voice of her story in the way that, sometimes when we're reading things from her perspective in this book, we kind of feel like, oh, at least we also have her perspective. And so we can at least form some judgments on her based on her own account of her actions, whereas, if you buy this other reading, which obviously is like, you're taking a little bit of a leap of faith on the author's behalf. If you buy the other reading, her characterization isn't even her own, like we're getting,
it's
Ankara's version. So it's still kind of like distilled, removed. It's still third party. It's all kind of hearsay. And so Zelu to me is really, is much more metaphor than like, I mean, it's still the embodied character of Zelu, and I think that's the thing that Zelu's character tries to like cling to and kind of own and take into her own hands is identity and self-definition. But still, there is the asterisk, if you accept the kind of novel's premise where it's like, Zelu didn't actually get to, self-author here,
Right.
So I to that end, like, I guess like I find that satisfying not really in the literary sense of like have all of the threads of the story concluded, in a like a start to finish kind of way that we expect from stories, but really because of the kind of like cognitive provocation here, like what does it mean to so I guess that's ultimately like what is like scratching the right itch for me here.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And again, having been friends with you for many years, it's also extremely on brand. A couple more thoughts here just to wrap up my feelings on the book. I also want to say, like, looking back, I'm realizing that a lot of this book didn't work for me. Like the first third I thought had great potential, and then once I was around the halfway point, I found myself just sort of like not wanting to keep reading. And unfortunately, that continued for me basically through the end of the book. I began to also find like the prose a little bit grating, again, especially in the Zelu chapters. And I found this part really weird, but I thought some of the themes that the book was setting up and really digging at ended up kind of like confused by the end. Like there were mixed messages on some of these themes. Like I found it incredibly weird that a book that centers African cultures, African characters, African traditions has a major plot beat where the rich white Jeff Bezos man is the guy who opens the door for Zelu's salvation, for her to like go out into space and experience this thing that this lifelong dream she's always had. And I'm just kind of like, I thought this whole book was giving me vibes like Jack Preston is some like untrustworthy white guy. We can't trust him. And he turned out to just like kind of give Zelu everything she wanted, quote unquote. And some of the ideas there kind of got muddy for me.
Yeah. Can I just challenge that one?
Please challenge that, yeah.
Okay. The only thing I will say about Jack Preston's character is it does feel like a bit of a Faustian bargain, because like he's offering her this path to this lifelong dream of hers of space exploration, of being an astronaut. But in the other hand, he's like doing exactly what her family warned her about with regards to Hugo. He's offering her this completely experimental, untested drug, to test on her as a guinea pig. And so I don't think it's like, and we feel very conflicted about all of her choices surrounding those moments. So that's the only thing that it's like, it doesn't leave her in the most like kind of redeeming light, and Jack Preston ends up being more like, the devil's bargain than
that's fair.
Than like a hero, a heroic figure.
That's true. I think that's a totally valid pushback there on my feelings on that. But I think thematically this book was trying to do one thing and often ended up doing another thing by the end. And this was one situation where I felt that. I also just thought, like, overall, looking at the book as a whole now, I found the parts that annoyed me the most were where it got really, like, sort of preachy and navel-gazing. Yeah. It got really, like, about writing and about being an author and this is a personal hang-up for me. I just refuse to like a thing that's about the thing itself. So, like, a movie that's about a main character who's a filmmaker, I'm like, fucking come up with something more creative.
Right.
A book that's about an author, I'm just like already over it. And so like I just don't like when storytellers are like, let me tell you this story about a storyteller. It's like I'm already sort of like, no, don't tell me that. Come up with a story.
Right.
And so like I found this book fell into that trap too much. Like it kept falling into this trap of like, let me make some commentary on the publication industry and the entertainment industry and like social media. And it got too much like self-insert, I got the feeling that I was reading more Okorafor venting than Zelu talking.
Right.
And that line I understand is like a little bit of the point of this book, the death of the author. It's like in the title, but it didn't, at the end of the day, it still wasn't satisfying for me. The meta nature of it wasn't enough for me to overlook that this was somebody getting on a soapbox and talking about their own things rather than staying within the story. I found we blurred that line a bit too much for my tastes. So ultimately, I didn't find the ending satisfying. And looking back, this wasn't a book for me personally. I'll end on this note, though. Much love to my boy MCZ. He's never done anything wrong in his life. I'll stand by that statement. Yeah. He was there for Zelu through thick and thin.
Yeah, goated.
And unfortunately, he got the short end of the stick. I think he deserved much better.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts from you?
Well, I think the only kind of final thing I'll kind of raise as we conclude here, final question I'll raise as we conclude here, is there is an interesting question about AI authorship in 2026 that I think is hard to get away from in this book.
Yes.
Because
another theme I thought got like mixed and muddy.
Sure. But it is, the case that in this book we have the claim essentially, or the premise that an automation, an AI, has authored a genuinely novel, creative story. And it's kind of it's a significant milestone, Yeah. And so
it's the Deus Ex Machina that saves the world.
That's true. But I will say I have to wonder what Okorafor thinks about large language models and the future of authorship. And that's just a question I'm kind of left with.
It's an interesting question. A book that's so much about being an author and writing stories and how important stories are and how powerful they are. Also then ending with a robot writing a story.
Right.
It feels to me like mixed message. It leaves me with more questions than answers. You know, it's like, so I'm not sure what Okorafor is getting at there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, those are our thoughts and feelings about this book. Let's take a quick break. But folks, don't go anywhere, because when we come back, as we like to do, we're going to dive deep into a thematic takeaway. So we'll see you in just a minute.
This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
All right, folks, welcome back. Let's now get into our takeaway today. Obssa, you wrote up something wonderful here, so I'll hand the mic to you to lead us through this.
Yeah. Well, to preface this, given your impressions and takeaways, boy, do I have the deep dive for you.
Let's go,
my friend Abu. For my deep dive today, I wanted to unpack the meta structure of the book, which, as we've said, is a novel about an author who writes a novel about robots who eventually write a novel with the very title of the book we're discussing, The Death of the Author.
Yes.
So, I don't know. It seemed to me like something worth untangling. So that's the direction I wanted to focus on today.
Okay.
I think the book eventually does make its theory of narrative pretty explicit. Ankara says in this section, stories are what holds all things together. They make things matter. They make all things exist, end quote. And what impressed me about that is that Okorafor does exactly that. She doesn't just state that argument, but she builds it into the structure of the novel. Through the first 2/3 of this book, the hierarchy seems pretty clear. Zelu's life is the outer real layer, the outer loop. It's assembled through these interviews and these narrated moments and anecdotes, while on the inner loop is Rested Robots. It's fictional. It's the world that she has created. And when that is inverted, when Ankara in the final scenes of this book claims authorship of Death of the Author, all of that collapses. Yeah. And we kind of reach the conclusion that this inner story may have been the outer frame all along. And I think there's a few different ways of reading that. On one level, it's kind of a causal thing. Zelu writes Ankara, as we kind of come to understand this novel, into being. And Ankara, therefore, being imbued by the experiences that we've seen Zelu go through, becomes the kind of character that's capable of writing Zelu back. So there's this kind of like breaking of the fourth wall where you're seeing the author reach down into the story, and of course we come to find out all along that it was the story that was giving life to the author. And I think there's also just kind of an interesting point being made here that stories don't create meaning on their own, and storytellers don't exist on their own. They're part of a kind of chain of authorship. And that, I think, is a very true statement. It's kind of a key part of what makes stories so powerful, is that it's part of how we tell the kind of tale of who we are back to ourselves, and therefore propagate that story. And it also, as part of the conceit of this novel, does, of course, kind of raise a loopy, recursive structure between you, the reader, and the book as well. You're forced to kind of engage with it in a way that is not so kind of straightforward as consuming something and accepting it as kind of the written word. You're forced to kind of redefine and to properly define the story of this book yourself as well in your mind, both in how you're predicting what's coming ahead, making extrapolations on the kind of person that Zelu is, or the kind of agents that Ankara and Dijele are. But in that, you, the reader, are very much an active agent. You're part of that loop and complicit. And that, I think, is very satisfying. It works on the part of the brain that's like declarative and factual, and you just kind of want, a clear record of what is happening and of what the plot is, or the characters that populate a given universe. And that, I think, is effectively done in this story. We've got that happening on these kind of two strands that we're following along. And that satisfies that part of our brain that wants that kind of declarative, factual, component of storytelling. But there's also, of course, the predictive, imaginative parts of our brain that are what make, you as a reader an active reader. It's the part of the brain that is kind of actively engaged in storytelling alongside the author.
Yeah.
There's a book actually I read earlier this year by Charles Yu that was written, I think, in 2010 or 2011, called How to Live Safely in a Science Fictional Universe, which just, random, kind of side plug here. Great book. But it has a similar kind of structure where the author, the reader, the characters, the story, they all fold back into one another. And that fourth wall breaking becomes part of the medium of the storytelling. And as I've said kind of repeatedly now, I'm obviously very delighted by that. But I think it's because it just raises so many questions about what it means to be a person and to be kind of an active agent with a consciousness and a sentience. And these are all obviously hyper relevant questions now as we kind of explore what it means to have technology that can talk back to us, that can, in a sense, tell stories, whether or not they're any good.
Right. Whether or not they're hallucinations.
Whether or not they're hallucinations. Whether or not this entire book was a hallucination.
Claude telling me the other day the sky is, in fact, not blue.
That's right. It was raining, however. So, who are we to question?
Right.
All to say anyways, I think, there's something to be said for that structure that, is kind of loopy and recursive, and in how it informs your experience of the story, but also kind of your experience of, self-determination or, meaning making generally.
Yeah.
And, I think finally, like, the thing that the book succeeds at in kind of, charting this ground or in tackling this question is making us experience that recursion. Zelu writes Ankara. Ankara may have written Zelu. Taking a step back, we know, of course, that Okorafor wrote both of these, and and it's still us, however, that has to kind of digest all of these separate, disparate strands to make the meaning of the novel. And in that way, I think it's not exactly that the author is dead, as the title kind of suggests or alludes to, but in fact, the author has multiplied, in this.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
We have not just Okorafor and Zelu, but now we have Ankara, and also as the reader who's trying to make sense of everything that's happening in this wacky novel, we are also kind of finding ourselves in that author's seat as well. So I'll wrap with the words that Ankara put to us pretty cleanly in the novel. Creation flows both ways.
Wow. I really love that perspective. This idea that we, the reader, are also part of this, part of the myth making, part of the meaning making,
right,
part of the storytelling.
Yeah.
And I think if you think back to our first episode, we talked about how on some level, this book is a response to a famous essay of the same name, The Death of the Author, which argues that stories should be interpreted in a vacuum outside the author. Like the author and the story are two independent things that can't be interrelated.
Right.
Okorafor, in this entire book, essentially making the argument that you just laid out for us. In fact, the reader, the author, the story, all three of these elements are constantly in conversation.
Right.
Interweaving with each other, influencing each other. And like Ankara puts it, creation flows both ways, from the author to the author, from the reader to the reader. And to try and interpret a story in a total vacuum is, I think, in Okorafor's view, the incorrect way to appreciate stories, the thing that gives our lives so much meaning.
Right.
That's a really beautiful perspective. It gives me, it makes the sharp edges of this novel a little softer for me, I think. Like I found myself really in the story rather than sort of sitting on top of it and experiencing it from this like sort of meta level,
right,
where I'm trying to interpret what Okorafor is trying to say rather than the literal events, the plot beats, the character moments taking place. And I think if you think of the book more as like a literary essay rather than like here's an actual beat by beat story,
right,
that you're supposed to be like invested in and world building, you're supposed to immerse yourself in. From that level, I do think it's an achievement. And I appreciate that your takeaway here kind of helps me zoom out to that level because I find myself really immersed in the nitty gritty. I'm boots on the ground in this war against the nobodies.
right.
when I need to be like, off planet with the trippers, kind of looking down at it from a 35,000 foot view.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to read it either way. Like for me, it's been also, again, to just kind of underscore why it's so fun to do these episodes. It's also fun to read along with somebody that is so frustrated by a legitimately frustrating character, and to kind of read it on that level as well is, that's the purpose of a story. The purpose of a story isn't simply to like be a metaphor for something. It's also just like, the plot, the characters, the scene, like the environment,
like internal consistency.
The internal consistency, like that is part of what that is the significant part, if not the biggest part of what a story is for, is to relay all of that to you and for that to like be replayed in your own head.
So. Famously, Homer didn't end all of his stories with, anyway, dear listener, now it's your turn. You figure out the rest,
Yeah,
this is just a recursive loop and creation works both ways, said Homer as he stormed off stage, story unfinished.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, this has been fun. And, I think like I love when we agree on a book because, reading something like Left Hand of Darkness and just spending hours together gushing about it is such a fun feeling.
Totally.
But I equally love when we disagree so vehemently on a book, you know? Like it's rare that we're so different.
Yeah.
Like usually, I might dislike something and you're like, I don't love it, but I don't hate it.
Yeah.
But here, we're definitely in different camps.
Yeah.
And I think there's something powerful in that because
Totally.
it essentially invites each of us to be like, okay, come over to my side of the line and just view it from where I'm looking at it. Does that make sense to you?
This is basically like if a Jubilee episode actually worked, you know?
Oh my God. That's so true. if a Jubilee episode was like actually made in good faith and not like meant for clicks.
Right. 20 fans of Rusted Robots and Death of the Author.
Face off against Abu in the center. You know what? I'll take you all on. All 20 of you. Well, 19 of you, because Obssa is the 20th.
That's right.
All of you get in this room with me, sit in a circle in chairs, and let's do it.
Fact checks.
Oh my gosh. Great takeaway. Thank you so much for sharing that, Obssa. Okay. One last thing to do on our to-do list before we call it a day. It's the last episode of this book. We've completed this book. And whenever we complete a book, we give it a very unofficial, very hazy science fiction book club rating from each of us. So, Obssa, how would you rate this book?
Well, this is, unequivocal for me.
Here we go.
I'd have to give this at least 5 trippers out of 5. Return to home with the message, the good news of the stars.
That's right.
Yes, essence.
Wow. Okay. 5 trippers out of 5. Mm-hmm. I don't think it'll come as a surprise that I'm going to rate this book 2 bowls of jollof rice out of 5 bowls of jollof rice.
You're leaving a lot of rice on the table there, my friend.
I'm leaving so much rice on the table. But unfortunately, that's where it lands for me. I will say, I think for most of the book, I was convinced that I was going to give this a 3. At the least. Maybe even a 4 if the ending really landed. And in fact, the ending didn't land so much for me that I knocked it down to a 2.
And I lost
that's where I'm
jollof
ending.
rice bowl.
I know. R.I.P. Alrighty. Well, this is a crazy thought, Obssa. We're done with season 3 of Science Fiction Book Club.
Get out of here. Wow.
This officially wraps up the 3rd season of this podcast. But if you're worried that we're going to disappear for a long time and there's no more reading to be done, don't you worry. We have already released the entire reading schedule for season 4 over on our website.
That's right.
Season 4 is going to begin very soon in August. We're going to kick it off with The Dog Stars. We're going to read that in preparation for the Ridley Scott movie that's coming up. Of course, we'll share a bonus episode on our thoughts on the movie as well. So Obssa and I are going to take a couple of weeks off just to relax, recharge, maybe read something that's not sci-fi. I know that's like sacrilegious to say here, but I do have some fantasy books that are just collecting dust on my bookshelf. But we'll be back in just a month to kick off a brand new season of the show. We have a lot of exciting books on the docket for season 4. If you're wondering what those books are, what the reading schedule is, when you should get your hold in for The Dog Stars and what chapters to read, check out the link in the show notes below to our website. Bookmark that page because that page is always kept up to date with the entire backlog of everything we've covered and all of the things we will cover in future seasons. So check that out and make sure you're prepared for when we are back in August for season 4.
Well, friends, what good is love if we can only see it through a window? We prefer your love visible in words or 5 stars. So show us your love by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to check out the other shows on the Lore Party Podcast Network on loreparty.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at lore_party. We're also, of course, on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, we cannot escape those who created us. It's a pretty ominous note.
Yeah. Sit with that until season 4, really let that sink in.
We both just live with our parents. It's quite a literal note.